You won't believe what this gorilla did to save a life. What happened in the depths of the Congo rainforest will leave you speechless. This is a story that will shatter everything you thought you knew about these magnificent creatures. The morning mist clung to the jungle canopy like a ghostly veil. Somewhere deep in the Virunga Mountains, where ancient trees stretched toward the heavens and the air hummed with the whisper of 1,000 unseen lives, a silverback gorilla named Kibwe sat perfectly still. His massive form, nearly 400 pounds of pure muscle draped in jet-black fur that caught the filtered sunlight like polished obsidian, was motionless. But his eyes, those deep, amber eyes, were watching. Always watching. Dr. Sarah Chen had been studying Kibwe's troop for 3 years. She knew every gesture, every vocalization, every subtle shift in their social hierarchy. But there was something about Kibwe that haunted her. In those eyes, she saw something that transcended the scientific papers and research grants. She saw understanding. She saw calculation. On this particular morning, Sarah's camera clicked softly as she documented the troop's feeding routine. The sound of gorillas munching on wild celery echoed through the clearing, a strangely peaceful symphony of contentment. Young ones tumbled over each other in play, their mothers watching with patient tolerance. Everything seemed normal. But Kibwe hadn't moved. His gaze was fixed on something beyond the clearing, toward the eastern ridge, where the forest grew darker and the undergrowth became an impenetrable wall of green. Sarah followed his line of sight, but saw nothing, just shadows, just leaves dancing in the breeze that carried the scent of rain and earth. Then she heard it. A sound that didn't belong. The crack of a branch, too loud, too careless, human footsteps, heavy and hurried, and then, cutting through the jungle's natural rhythm like a blade, a child's cry. But what happened next would change everything. Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. 6-year-old Emmanuel, the son of a local ranger, had been playing near the research camp. The village children had been warned 1,000 times never to venture this deep, but curiosity is a powerful force in young minds. Kibwe's head snapped toward the sound with frightening speed. His massive hands, each one capable of crushing bone, pressed into the earth as he rose to his full height. 800 pounds of primal power standing upright, his chest expanding as he drew in the air, reading the wind for information. Sarah scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The other gorillas had frozen too, sensing their leader's sudden tension. The playful tumbling stopped. The eating ceased. In the space of 3 heartbeats, the entire troop was on high alert. Then Kibwe did something Sarah had never seen before. He looked directly at her, not the usual glance of acknowledgement that wild animals give researchers they've grown accustomed to. This was different. This was eye contact with intention, with meaning. His gaze bore into hers for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 seconds. And in those 3 seconds, Sarah could have sworn she saw a question in those amber depths. "Trust me." Before she could process what was happening, Kibwe dropped to all fours and exploded into motion. The jungle erupted around him. Leaves scattered like startled birds. Branches bent and snapped as 400 pounds of muscle and determination barreled through the undergrowth with impossible speed. Sarah ran after him, her equipment forgotten, her scientific training abandoned in the face of pure instinct. She had to reach Emmanuel before. Before what? The thought choked her. The eastern ridge was dangerous. Steep ravines hidden beneath innocent-looking vegetation, leopard territories, and worse, poacher traps. Illegal snares set for bush meat that didn't discriminate between antelope and child. Emmanuel's cries grew louder, more desperate. Sarah's lungs burned as she crashed through the forest, thorns tearing at her clothes, roots trying to trip her with every step. But Kibwe was faster, so much faster. She could hear him ahead, his breath coming in powerful huffs, his knuckles hitting the ground in that distinctive gorilla rhythm, thump, 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 like the heartbeat of the forest itself. Then the crying stopped. Sarah's entire world contracted into a single point of terror. "Emmanuel," she screamed, not caring about protocol, not caring about disturbing the wildlife. "Emmanuel." She burst into a small clearing, and stopped so suddenly she nearly fell. The scene before her seemed impossible, like something from a fever dream. Emmanuel dangled upside down, 3 feet off the ground, his ankle caught in a wire snare attached to a bent sapling. The trap had sprung when he'd stepped on the trigger plate hidden beneath leaves. His face was purple with blood rushing to his head, tears streaming upward across his forehead, his small hands desperately clutching at the wire cutting into his leg. But that wasn't what made Sarah's breath catch. Kibwe stood directly beneath the boy. And what he did next defied every scientific understanding of gorilla behavior. The silverback had positioned himself so that Emmanuel's frantically waving hands were just inches from his head. Any sudden movement, any miscalculation, and those small fingers could grab his fur, could startle him, could trigger the kind of defensive response that would be catastrophic. Gorillas, for all their gentle reputation among their own kind, are wild animals, unpredictable, dangerous when threatened. Sarah had seen Kibwe break a tree trunk as thick as her leg during a dominance display. She'd watched him charge a leopard with such ferocity that the big cat had fled without looking back. And now he stood perfectly, impossibly still, allowing this terrified human child to dangle above him. Kibwe's eyes flicked to Sarah again, that same look, that same question. Then slowly, so slowly it seemed to take forever, he reached up. Sarah wanted to scream, wanted to rush forward, wanted to do something, anything. But she was frozen, her scientific mind warring with her human heart. She knew that any interference could startle Kibwe, could turn this delicate moment into tragedy. The gorilla's massive hand, each finger as thick as a man's wrist, extended upward with impossible gentleness. He wasn't reaching for the wire, he was reaching for Emmanuel. The boy's eyes, wild with fear and pain, locked onto the enormous creature beneath him. In that moment, some instinct older than civilization seemed to take over. Emmanuel stopped struggling, stopped crying. His small hand reached down and wrapped around Kibwe's finger. The next 60 seconds would determine if this child lived or died. Time seemed to crystallize. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the rustle of leaves in the canopy far above, could hear the distant call of a hornbill. But louder than all of that was the sound of Kibwe's breathing, steady, controlled, focused. With Emmanuel's hand gripping his finger, Kibwe carefully, methodically began to examine the snare. His free hand moved to the wire wrapped around the boy's ankle. Sarah knew what he was looking at. The wire was tight, already cutting into skin. One wrong move would tighten it further, could sever tendons, could cause permanent damage. Kibwe grunted softly, a sound Sarah had heard before during problem-solving moments. He was thinking, planning. The gorilla's gaze traveled from the wire to the bent sapling holding the tension, then back to Emmanuel's face. The boy was crying again, quiet tears now, but he held on to Kibwe's finger with all the trust a 6-year-old could muster. Then Kibwe did something that would later make Sarah question everything she thought she knew about animal intelligence. He looked at the sapling, then at the wire, then at Sarah. And he pointed. Not a random gesture, not an accidental movement, a deliberate extension of his arm, finger outstretched, indicating the bent tree. Then he made a snapping motion with his hands. Cut the tension, free the tree. Sarah's hands trembled as she pulled her field knife from her belt. She'd carried it for 3 years, used it to cut sampling vines, to clear paths, to prepare food. She never imagined she'd use it for this. I'm coming, Emmanuel, she called softly, moving slowly, showing Kibwe her hands, the knife, her intentions. Stay very still, baby, stay very, very still. Kibwe didn't move as she approached, didn't flinch when she passed within arm's reach of him, close enough that she could smell the rich, earthy scent of his fur, could feel the heat radiating from his massive body. He simply stood there, one hand supporting Emmanuel's upper body now, keeping the blood from rushing too severely to the boy's head, the other staying perfectly positioned for the child to hold on to. But the hardest part was still to come. The rope holding the sapling was thick, designed to hold struggling animals. Sarah's knife was sharp but small. She began sawing at the fibers, each pull of the blade seeming to take an eternity. Sweat dripped into her eyes. Her hands shook so badly she had to stop twice to wipe them on her pants. Emmanuel whimpered. The wire was cutting deeper. "SHH, baby, almost there," Sarah whispered, not sure if she was comforting the child or herself. Kibwe made a soft, rumbling sound in his chest, the kind of vocalization gorilla mothers use to soothe their infants. The sound vibrated through the clearing, low and gentle, and impossibly, miraculously, Emmanuel's whimpering quieted. 3 more fibers, 2, 1. The rope snapped with a sound like a gunshot. The sapling whipped upward, releasing its tension. The wire went slack. Emmanuel dropped directly into Kibwe's waiting arms. The gorilla caught him as gently as if he were made of spider silk. 400 pounds of raw power cradling 6-year-old Emmanuel against his chest, one massive hand supporting the boy's head, the other carefully holding his small body. Sarah lunged forward, her knife making quick work of the wire around Emmanuel's ankle. Blood welled from the cut, but it wasn't deep. No permanent damage. The boy would heal. As soon as the wire fell away, Kibwe carefully, deliberately set Emmanuel on the ground between them. Then, and this was the part that would haunt Sarah's dreams for years, the silverback reached out and gently touched the wound on the boy's ankle with one finger. Just a touch, just an acknowledgement. Then he looked at Sarah one more time. And she understood. "He's yours now, take care of him." But the story doesn't end there. Kibwe turned and began walking back toward his troop, his knuckles hitting the earth in that rhythmic pattern, leaves crunching beneath his weight. He paused once, 20 feet away, and looked back, not at Emmanuel, at Sarah. In that glance, she saw something that would make her question everything she'd learned in her decade of primatology studies. She saw satisfaction, pride, maybe, or perhaps just the simple acknowledgement of one intelligent being to another. Then he was gone, swallowed by the green cathedral of the forest. Sarah scooped Emmanuel into her arms, feeling his small heart hammering against her chest, his tears soaking into her shirt. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you." As she carried him back toward the camp, back toward safety and medical care and his frantically worried parents, she kept replaying those moments in her mind. The way Kibwe had looked at her, the way he'd pointed, the way he'd cradled Emmanuel with more care than some humans showed their own children. 3 days later, Sarah returned to the clearing where Kibwe's troop usually fed. He was there, sitting in his usual spot, surrounded by his family. The youngsters tumbled around him, pulling at his fur, climbing on his back. He tolerated it all with patient dignity, occasionally reaching out to steady one who got too ambitious. When he saw Sarah, he didn't react with surprise or alarm. He simply looked at her with those knowing amber eyes, then went back to carefully peeling a stem for one of the juveniles who hadn't quite figured out the technique yet. Sarah sat down and watched, her camera hanging unused around her neck. She wasn't documenting research anymore. She was witnessing something far more profound. The truth is, we share 98% of our DNA with gorillas, but somewhere in that 2% difference, we've convinced ourselves we're fundamentally separate, superior, alone in our capacity for thought, for planning, for empathy. Kibwe proved otherwise. He saw a child in danger. He assessed the situation. He made a choice, not based on instinct, but on understanding, and he risked everything to save a life that meant nothing to his survival. That's not instinct. That's not conditioning. That's not anthropomorphism or wishful thinking. That's heroism. Emmanuel recovered fully. The scar on his ankle faded to a thin white line that he'd show his friends years later, telling them the story of the gorilla who saved him. Most wouldn't believe it, but Sarah knew the truth. She continued her research for 2 more years before leaving Virunga. On her last day, she sat in that familiar clearing one final time. Kibwe was there, older now, his silver back more pronounced, a few new scars from fights to maintain his position. She didn't try to say goodbye. You don't say goodbye to wild animals. But as she stood to leave, Kibwe looked at her, and in a gesture so subtle she almost missed it, he inclined his head, just slightly, just once. "I see you, I remember." Sarah nodded back, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for showing us what we needed to see. The truth about gorillas, about all animals, is that we've only just begun to understand the depth of their intelligence, the breadth of their emotions, the power of their choices." Kibwe didn't just save a life that day. He saved our understanding of what's possible in the hearts of creatures we've dismissed as mere animals. And in doing so, he taught us the most important lesson of all, that heroism isn't about being human, it's about being humane. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to see the beauty in our world. Because stories like Kibwe's don't just deserve to be told, they deserve to be remembered, celebrated, and protected. Hit that subscribe button to see more incredible true stories that remind us we're not alone in our capacity for love, courage, and sacrifice. The jungle holds countless secrets. Kibwe's story is just one of them, but it's a story that changes everything.